referee again checking his watch. And there it goes! The final whistle!
Carl Corzin will wait inside the box for this from Martin Knapp. And a header on it there, and that might have been it. That is a goal for Canada. The header was it Jason DeVos?
One last chance for Canada. Sophie Schmidt takes a deflection. Matheson is down the goal. The wins bronze for Canada.
Qualified for World Cup 86, defeating Honduras by a score of 2-1 here in St. John's, Newfoundland this afternoon.
Welcome to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. My name is Jason DeVos. I'm the Director of Development with Canada Soccer. As always, joined by Brad Fougier, Digital and Corporate Communications Manager with Canada Soccer. Brad, how's your week been? Have you been watching a lot of soccer on the internet or on TV or whichever streaming service you use these days? What's been occupying your time this week?
I have been watching a lot of Italian football.
Explain to people your allegiance to Italian football, because you are a massive fan of Italian football, are you not?
Yeah, and I don't have a reason. I have no reason. I've had access to it. Canadian television has always had some Italian football on. It's usually on just random channels. Although I am a DAZN customer, and DAZN has had Serie A for its entire existence, I think. I'm an Inter fan. I have no idea why. I always liked Javier Zanetti. And found the Adriano saga circa 2006, 2007, 2008, just as they were becoming champions again. Really interesting for some reason. I mean, I'm a Maradona fan as well, so like just drama seems to follow me around. You're really putting me on the spot here. I'm loving all this.
No kidding.
But yeah, I don't know. I have a perverse interest. Maybe it's the defensive style. I actually
that was
had
the
this
correct
conversation
answer
yesterday, right? Yeah, it's that defense first methodology. And you know, some people are like, oh, it's too mucky. There's not enough attacking, et cetera, which is obviously blasphemy. I mean, that's not the truth.
Yeah. Well, as an Inter fan, my appreciation for the Italian game stems from the plethora of outstanding international world-class defenders that have come out of that nation. So Maldini, Nesta, Baresi, you name them. And those are all AC Milan players, by the way. So I'm sure you and me would be at loggerheads if we ever came to watch the Inter derby, the Milan derby.
Victor and I mean, there's a
long
list of AC
you never
Milan
mentioned
fans
mentioned that you were an Inter fan when we had Victor on the podcast, did you?
Nor have I in any conversation, email correspondence, anything. I'm no fool.
Yeah, brilliant. There's also been a significant amount of MLS play and NWSL play. Where are we with all of that? What have you been watching in that space?
Yeah, the times of those matches have been somewhat trying for me as a person trying to stay afloat in a very busy period for us and a parent. Yeah. So I haven't seen as many of those games as I typically would. I do usually watch a lot of MLS and do watch a fair bit of NWSL, but I haven't been watching a ton. But I am aware of where we are, and we're heading into the sort of knockout round for the NWSL Challenge Cup. So 8 teams remaining, 14 players across those 18 teams. So lots to watch for Canada Soccer's women's national team fans out there. And on the MLS is back tournament side. I guess we should note that we're recording this on Thursday afternoon for publishing on Friday, but tonight we'll have the 401 Derby in its odd Florida version.
It's not the same, is it?
No, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different.
Well, I'm certain that the animosity between the two teams, Toronto and Montreal, is not lessened in any way, shape, or form simply because of the location of that game. But always a tasty one when those two teams face off in any sport, for that matter. Toronto and Montreal generally tend not to like each other in sporting contexts.
Yeah, the one of the teams, either Montreal or Toronto FC, put out a graphic promoting the game today, and it's Michael Bradley absolutely manhandling Bojan Krkic. So, there's on all levels there's animosity in that match, seemingly, be it the digital manager or the generals on the field. And then Vancouver, I guess it would be remiss not to mention Vancouver. Vancouver have a match coming up against defending MLS champions Seattle Sounders. So that'll take place on the 20th.
Yeah.
So lots of Canadian.
Did you catch
content.
any of the Vancouver San Jose game from the other night?
I did not.
You didn't?
Did you?
Yeah, I did. Unfortunately, yeah. Some of the defending, I was cringing at some of the defending. It really was like nails on a chalkboard for me. But San Jose coming out on top of that one 4-3. But
you got a feel for them. I mean, I'd be interested to hear your take on this. They arrive. Many teams arrived as late as possible, I guess is one way to put it.
Yeah.
They show up. They're training. They're away from everything they know. Everyone they know. I mean, is that?
It's got to be hard. It's got to be hard. I have nothing but sympathy for the players and the coaching staff of having to go through this, and I can't even imagine what it must be like for them. It's got to be difficult. It has to be difficult to be able to go into a very strange bubble and perform at your highest level, away from family, away from friends, away from fans, no home field advantage at all for either team. So I'm certain that every player involved right now will look back on this phase of their career as the most peculiar thing they've ever experienced, regardless of whether you're playing in MLS, NWSL, if you're playing in the Bundesliga like Fonzie is right now. It must be difficult and odd for them. But again, like everyone else involved in the game right now, it's about being fluid and evolving and adapting and taking the circumstances in your stride and just growing a new skin and going off and delivering as best you possibly can. But yeah, my sympathy's definitely with the players for sure in this period. And also we have to look forward to the return of CPL at some time in the not too distant future, one would hope. And hopefully we'll have some news on that front in the near future to be able to talk about the return of the domestic league here in Canada for its second season. So lots to look forward to. And we'll get to our next guest very quickly because he's on a time crunch, and we're going to be joined by Eric Tenlado from Canada Soccer's Men's Excel program to talk about the upcoming webinar that Mauro Biello and Andrew Olivieri will be delivering on Sunday in French, Excel Men's National Team 101 and 102. But we'll have Eric join us after the break to give us a little update on that side of things. So stay tuned. Pleased to welcome now to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast, Eric Tenlado, who's a men's Excel development coach working under the leadership of John Herdman, our men's national team head coach and Excel director. Eric, welcome to the podcast. You've been working hard alongside the other men's Excel program staff to adapt and evolve as we manage our way through these unprecedented times. One aspect of your work has been the socialization of the men's Excel curriculum and content via a series of webinars that have been made available to the Canadian coaching community. How has that content been received so far by coaches from coast to coast?
Hi, Jason, and thank you for having us on the podcast. Firstly, I would like to differentiate between the webinars we did. So we ran two webinars that were hosted by Canada Soccer and were nationwide webinars with access for any people in Canada, from coaches to players to any parents, referees, anyone involved in Canada that wanted to join in. They were welcome to join. So we ran two of those, one in April and one in May, which we called Excel 101 and Excel 102. And then we ran 7 webinars for a more targeted audience for those coaches that work with national youth license organizations or that are endorsed by provincial soccer organizations because are working on a talent perform pathway with high performance players. So we review the audience we had, and we've been able to impact 1,800 people between those across those 9 webinars, whereas around 600 people is from those targeted organizations that we spoke. And we've seen that 150 coaches never miss one of those webinars. So there is a pool of coaches around 150 that they are highly interested in the content, and they've been following those webinars all from the first one to the last one. I would like to say as well that at the end of each webinar, we conducted a survey with different questions about from where the people that is joining us is based, where they work, their role, what age group they work with, and then satisfaction questions as well. And we were able to reach a 97% satisfaction, and people leaving comments on the survey or sending feedback to the different people working across the program through email, on the comment section on the surveys, social media, and different ways. They've been very grateful with the transparency and the amount of detail that we've been able to develop and deliver.
Yeah. It's been amazing. And the feedback that I've received from coaches across the country has been extremely positive. And I think it's the first time that I'm aware of where a national team program is disseminating its philosophy, its framework, its technical blueprint across the country to educate coaches working in Canada. Why is that important for us as a nation to get that information out to the wider soccer community?
Yeah, I think it's important, and we were debating about how much content we should be showing on those webinars, because you know that nowadays on the internet everybody's able to screenshot and share with potentially coaches or teams that are going to play with us at the CONCACAF or international level. But we came down to the conclusion that first and most important is about building trust and building those relationships with the provinces, with the coaches working in each province and across the country, coast to coast, and building that trust is about transparency and showing what we are doing and how we are doing it and why we are doing it. So providing the realities of our context, which is international football, and we thought that by taking this risk of putting our content, our IV in their hands, in their eyes, we are winning a lot. What we are winning is coaches across the country that they are aware of how we work, why we work that way, and what are the profiles of our players and what are our tactics. So now they are in a stage that they have this knowledge and they can copy to create their own methodologies, which will develop better players for our country.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. And the feedback that I've received from so many of the coaches that I've spoken with since these webinars started is they never knew what it looked like at the national team level and how much thought, detail, and work goes into preparing players and to developing this curriculum and to educating players to play in a unified way at every level on the men's Excel side, from youth teams straight through to the senior men's national team. On Sunday, Mauro Biello and Andrew Olivieri are going to be delivering the Men's Excel 101 and 102 webinars in French. What are the key messages that coaches, players, parents can expect to hear from Mauro and Andrew on Sunday?
Yeah, it's interesting, though, that one. The Excel 101, 102 have been a summary of the first 4 modules that we delivered regionally. And each one of those models are 90 minutes each. So what we are trying is to summarize everything to deliver just one model in a 90-minute window, where Mauro and Andrew will walk the audience through the Excel vision and strategy as a program. What is the tactical vision of the international context that we are in? The in-game methodology, especially from an attacking organization perspective, and then all the aspects around tactical excellence and how we are how delivered we are from platforms. What we call platforms is the way that we build up our game.
Yeah, it's been fascinating, and obviously having worked with yourself, worked with John, and worked with Ken on the women's side, it's been great to be able to see this content getting out to the wider Canadian soccer community. So if you haven't already registered for the webinar on Sunday, please do so. I'm certain that you're going to take something away from it that you can learn from and that you can apply in your own coaching, working with your own players at the club level. Eric, I know you're phenomenally busy, and I know you have to run to jump on another webinar, so I won't keep you long. I'll let you go. Thank you very much for taking the time to go into some detail on the content and the curriculum and the webinars that are taking place on Sunday. Thank you very much for the work you've done, Eric. Keep up the great work and stay safe. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, pal.
Thank you, Jason, and keep up the good work with the podcast.
Thank you. And after the break, we're going to talk to two of the senior technical leaders at Langley United Soccer Association out in Langley, BC, about the work they're doing in their club to overcome the pandemic and reintroduce soccer as they go through the return to play phase. So stay tuned for that after the break. Thanks. Pleased to welcome to the podcast two of the technical leaders at Langley United Soccer Association, Mark Parker, who is the technical director, and Chelsea Hannison, who is the assistant technical director and U3 to U10 technical lead at the club. Mark and Chelsea, welcome to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. How are you today?
Thank you very much, Jason. We're doing really good out here. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. Chelsea, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Excited to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
Good. Excellent. So let's start with your background, each of you, because you have a very unique backstory and how you got involved in soccer, where you grew up, where you were born. Mark, we'll start with you. You're the technical director at the club, but you have a long relationship with the game, and your background is from another nation. People will have probably picked up on that based on your accent. Tell us where you're from, where you grew up, how you got involved in football, and how you ended up coming to Canada.
Sure will, Jason. You may pick up on the South African accent, but in fact, I was born in Bootle in Liverpool.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. And
wow.
bleed red. And
so you're happy right now?
We're pretty happy right now, Jason. Yes, we are.
Brilliant.
Born in Bootle in Liverpool, and in 1963, my parents and sister we emigrated to South Africa. Getting involved in soccer, I didn't have a choice. My dad and my mom, they were staunch Liverpool fanatics. We lived in a little small apartment one morning, and I woke up one morning and my bedroom was painted in Liverpool red. The apartment was actually across the road from a stadium called the Caledonian Stadium, which is in Pretoria. And it was the home of Acadia Shepherds and still is the home of Acadia Shepherds. And I would go on to play for them as an older youth and a young adult.
Wow.
On Sunday mornings, my dad and his mates would jump the fences of the stadium, and we'd run around the park and kick a ball around. And that's where it all started for me. Fantastic memories growing up in South Africa as a young boy. We didn't play organized soccer in South Africa until the age of 12.
Really?
Everything else was street football, playing with your friends, the odd schoolyard pickup game. Obviously, Dad being involved was great. I joined a club called Berea Park, which was a railway-owned club. Owned by the government. And that's where my first experience of organized football was. And believe it or not, one of my coaches at Berea Park was a gentleman by the name of Roy Hodgson.
Wow.
Roy had as we know, had a wonderful coaching, or has a wonderful coaching career, and is now the manager of Crystal Palace. He was involved in the first team at Berea Park at the time, and to supplement his income, I would assume, he was a coach in the youth program. But great memories playing in the youth teams there.
Yeah.
I got a funny story for you, Jason, though, and I think this would hit home with a lot of people around the country. I believe I had a very good youth career as a young player. But it was only years after that I look back and I realized why. And the good old saying that coaches pick the biggest and fastest and strongest kids and your team will do well. Well, I was a product of that development model.
Yeah.
At the age of 13, I was close to 5'9". And, the coach used to come to me and say, you've got 3 responsibilities. You're going to play center back. You're going to win all the high balls. No one's going to get past you. And when you do get the ball, look for the center forward.
Yeah.
And I did those jobs very well, but I couldn't juggle a balloon. I like to look at the things that, that was probably looking back now, the wrong way to develop players.
Yeah.
But I take that as a positive in my side, that I will never have a coach in my club teaching players that way.
It's amazing what we learn from our own experiences, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely it is. And, I stayed at Brea Park until I was about 17. And at the age of 17, I joined the rival club, Arcadia Shepherds. And this is where I felt that my development improved tremendously. Arcadia were a very wealthy club. They had a wealthy board. They had good sponsorships. And they managed to bring in all the retiring players from around Europe. So, at times we actually had Bobby Charlton play a couple of games when I was growing up. We had Owen Hand, who was an Irish international. We had Jerry Queen, who was a Scottish international. So when those guys came in, again, they got involved in the youth programs, and we learned a lot through them. At the adult level, I went to Brighton and Hove Albion in the UK for a trial at the age of about 18. And that's where I realized that I had missed an awful lot of development time as a youth. And I was there for 3 weeks, but I stayed for 6 months, and then I returned back to South Africa and played at the adult level in and out of semi-professional teams. There was no professional football in South Africa at the time. It was, you'd work in the day and come train in the evening, and they'd reimburse you a little bit for your efforts for playing for the clubs. But that's my background into football.
How did you come to Canada? When did you make that decision?
Well, at the time, it was 1998 when I came to Canada. 2 daughters at the time. My eldest was 12 and the youngest was 4. And the time in South Africa that we were going through, it wasn't very safe. And we felt it best that we give our girls the opportunity in another country. And we made a decision to come to Canada, and we ended up in Vancouver, which I couldn't be any happier.
Yeah. There's certainly worse places in our country to land, aren't there?
Oh, absolutely. There is. But I have another funny story. At the time in 1998, when we came over to Canada, girls never played soccer in South Africa. It was a boys' sport, and that's the way it was. So we moved over, I think it was in February of 98. And my eldest daughter, Lauren, went to a school, and she came home one day and she said, "Dad, I want to play in the soccer team." And I said, "No, you're not playing with boys." And then she said, "No, Dad, there's a girls' soccer team at the school." So I investigated a little bit, and sure there was. There was a little girls' team, and I ended up coaching it. And that was my first introduction to coaching in Canada. I had obviously coached in South Africa. I coached the under-18 Pretoria University team for a period of time. But the first introduction in Canada was to coach a little girls' team at the Sunnyside Elementary in Surrey.
So a long and winding road, I suppose, is a good way to put it then.
Absolutely was.
Yeah.
And as I said, Jason, one that I look back up, and I am very, very happy the way it's worked out. I joined Surrey United. Lauren, my daughter, came home again and said that she wanted to continue playing, and the school season had finished. So I got her involved with Surrey United, and I ended up coaching as a volunteer coach with Surrey United. And a couple of months into the volunteer role, Tom Duncan and Sandra Duncan were the president of Surrey United, and they came to me and asked me whether I would be interested in becoming the technical director of the club, which I very much liked the idea of, and I got involved, and I had a contract with them, and I lasted 18 months at the club before I ended up at BC Soccer.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'm always amazed with people's backstory and when they started playing the game, when they first fell in love with the game, how it's impacted their life to get where they are now. And we'll touch a little bit on your role at Langley United in a second, but I want to go to Chelsea because I know Chelsea has a very prolific playing background, but I wanted to get your introduction of yourself, Chelsea, and talk a little bit about, your background, how you started playing soccer, where you started playing, and obviously the successes and even the failures that you've had along the way.
Yeah, for sure. Mine, my background's a little bit different in the sense of it's just not as soccer heavy from the early stages. I come from a family that where I was the only one playing soccer pretty much, and everyone was hockey and ringette and all the ice sports out there.
Did you play those sports as well?
I did not play organized sports, but I was definitely on the ice with my dad and my sister and my cousins. Yeah, definitely. So, and the other one was baseball and softball that we were pretty big on. So I was kind of part of the family where it was very multi-sport heavy. And, to this day as a coach, looking back on that, similar to what Mark said, what your experiences kind of influence your perspective on things, just that appreciation for what multi-sport has to offer our youth has played a huge part in that for sure. But I started in Langley. I was very, very young, started at Langley Girls Soccer and continued playing with just happy to be there, show up. Parents didn't know too much about the process as I was getting out of grassroots into my preteen, early teen age. And, luckily I fell into the hands of coaches that kind of guided us through it and started playing with the provincial program. So the British Columbia provincial program that they had at the time. Mm-hmm. And through that, I was able to get into the National Training Center at around 13, going on 14. And I was there for about 3 to 4 years training at this NTC center at Burnaby Lake and not really knowing entirely what I was training for, simply just because, again, my family wasn't too familiar with the whole process. And so it's quite interesting just knowing that I enjoyed it wholeheartedly. And I was there, the type of player that, not even just as a player, like I was a tomboy growing up and everything that I did was you work hard and you compete. And if everyone starts working hard, you work harder. And that's really all it was. You didn't really have to know what was at the end of that as long as you enjoyed it and you were giving your best. And that's really like how I translate to what I do, whether it's softball or if I was on the ice with my cousins and sister, or if I was, on the soccer field, it was all the same mentality. Did that. And it was weird because I was about 15 years old when I was looking for a team, like a club team to play. And through the National Training Center, I met Mark. And so I've known Mark for a very long time, well before I got into the coaching aspect. And as a player, he introduced me into the Metro Women's Soccer League with Surrey United. And I was able to join on, and Martin Foden was the one who introduced me to my first women's team at the age of 15. And, without having what the girls have now, the Rex program and things like that. So went into the NTC, ended up at 15 years old into the Metro Women's Soccer and was able to participate in that for quite some time. And that's where I started to earn all those championships like you were mentioning. So we have about 13 provincial championships with that group. And we placed every time we went to nationals and earned our Jubilee Trophy championship title in 2011. So that was a pretty exciting youth going on to women's career. Mm-hmm. And that led me into going into my university career. Mm-hmm.
So you were also runner-up, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, 2012, 2014, 2017, 2018. Is that accurate? Because if it's not, I'm going to have to go back to my source and make sure that he's got the facts straight. That's been a pretty successful group of players, has it not?
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of, it's funny because like the whole getting to nationals was a huge challenge in itself because there's a lot of great competition in British Columbia. And once you get there, the process of going from competing in your province to competing against teams you've never seen before, it is a treacherous week. It's tough on your body, your mind, all that sort of thing. And so coming up runner-up, even though it was frustrating on paper, it was definitely an achievement for many different reasons each season. But 2011, when we were able to snag that gold, was probably one of the highlights of my playing career, just simply with all the facts that came behind it. Outside of the university career that I had too. So,
yeah. Where did you go to university?
I was at Eastern Washington University. So it's in the Big Sky Conference, Division I NCAA. And I was able to play all 4 years there, lettered all 4 years, was captain for 2 of those 4 years. And I actually met Tamara Hajay. She was the assistant coach at the time. And it was my second female coach that I actually got to work under that kind of shaped who and where I am today. So I think the first one was, and we all know Tracy David from University of Victoria. She was my coach in 2005, where I got to be on the BC team with her, and she was leading the way. And just the way that she carried the group, it was so different from the experiences that I had in the past with teams. They were all great experiences with coaches I've had, but my first very strong, opinionated, my dogs are barking in the background, as you can hear.
Not a problem. Chelsea, you and I are both dog lovers, so you're welcome to bring your dogs on the podcast anytime. Yeah. No problem.
They heard me. That's too funny.
Oh, brilliant.
But yeah, Tracy David and Tamara Hajay, my two first female coaches, and it was an incredible experience, not only just with the knowledge that they had of the game, but like I said, the approach of having that tough love but knowing when to soften it up a bit and really just have that human approach. So yeah, it was a pretty interesting career, going straight from Tracy David, my final youth, and then going into Tamara Hajay as my 4 years at Eastern Washington was pretty interesting.
Yeah. How impactful were those female coaches for you? I mean, we talked about this in the past about you can't be what you can't see. When you had Tracy David and your university coach, female coach, coaching female players, how impactful was that for you? Did that give you the spark to say, hey, maybe I can do this one day?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing for me, it repeats itself a bit later on in how I came about to coaching, was I completely doubted coaching as a career multiple times when I first kind of stepped into it. And I think a lot of it, personality may be part of it, but also just knowing that I've seen women do this and do it successful in the past and within my own experiences, it kind of gave me that final push. Like, why not? Why not give it a try? If Tracy David, can do it and be very successful at it, if Tamara Hajay can do it and be very successful at it, and they both continue to do it, I think I could, try and emulate what they brought to the table when I was their player. So I think the importance of having it is not only, like, for me, being a leader came a little bit naturally in a lot of the settings that I was in. And I don't know if that was just being in the multi-sport lifestyle or, having that tomboy personality where you're just a little bit more assertive and ready to go out there and grab life by the horns kind of thing. But I learned a lot about self-leadership and the difference between leadership and self-leadership through those two women, and just how you carry yourself and how you are as a person and as a human, and how it translates to who you are as a player on the field. And that impacted me big time.
Can you expand on that? I like that term, self-leadership. What does that mean?
Yeah, so self-leadership is, and if you take the term leadership, you go out to a group and you're able to lead the group through let's just use an example of like a warm up, or, on the field, if the team's starting to feel down, you're able to rah and get them going. But the self-leadership is actually the most dedication to be that person. So it doesn't just happen overnight. It's the diligence of, you wake up and you want to be brave, you have to find a way to be brave. So if it's asking more questions when you're uncertain, if it's being brave to fail and just acknowledging, hey, I'm really scared to fail right now. But you're telling yourself, hey, you can do this. Ask the question. If you sound silly, whatever. So the whole concept of self-leadership is just redirecting. Basically, you're just leading yourself. And I know it sounds very logical when I say it like that, but for me, for the players, when I introduce it to a lot of the young kids, you can sit there and show up to practice, and you can lead the team through a tough practice or fitness or whatever it is that you're going through. But if you want to improve yourself and be better, are you taking the time to dedicate that little extra effort to go out on your own? Are you dedicating your time to say hello to people at the park and be friendly and smile, and just recognizing the things about you that will make you into a great leader before actually stepping into the role of a leader?
That's a great way to look at it. I think one of the biggest challenges when you're in a leadership role is your mindset is to help others. And it's not always to help yourself or to seek out people who can help you. And, it's that question of, well, who supports the leader, and what does that look like? So I think that's a really great skill to be teaching young girls and boys as they begin their journey in the game, is that, your role is to help your team and to help each other, but you also have to find ways to help yourself too. So I think that's really fascinating. Does that tie into the mentorship program that you have at Langley United? It was one of the things that really piqued my interest about the club, because you have a very clearly defined mentorship program at the club. And maybe both you and Mark can talk about this and the importance of that with your organization.
Well, in this area, Jason, you've touched on it with Chelsea. I have to give an awful lot of credit to Chelsea for getting our leadership program going. Chelsea, as you know, she has an uncanny knack of being able to motivate youth and adult coaches through the most gloomy days in Vancouver. But one of the things that the staff, Chelsea, myself, and the two other gentlemen, Nick Solsma and Azad Palani, one of the things that we've agreed to as a mandate from a technical staff is never to let our volunteer coaches to be alone. It doesn't matter whether they're youth, it doesn't matter whether they're adults, it doesn't matter what certification level they have. They will always have access to resources through the technical staff. Chelsea has taken this down a completely different and unique road with her youth mentorship program, bringing them on into coaches. So I'll let Chelsea pick this one up from here.
Yeah, so with our mentorship program, there's different layers to it. The one that I would say has been not the most successful, but the fastest growing at this point is our junior coach program. And this one, we've taken 2 layers to it, where kids will sign up or show interest in the junior coach program without even having any coaching aspect. No on-field experience or anything like that. We're not even really taking them on-field right away. And it's it's called a Kids Connect. And it is ages, I'd say the youngest is 10, and it ranges from 10 to 14, where these kids just want to know a bit more about the athlete's mentality in a very kid-friendly version. So we talk about things like bravery in this Kids Connect, and we'll do things on, what is bravery and how do you ask questions. And we've even delved on the leadership versus self-leadership. And topics that come up are completely driven by the kids. And the first session, whenever we do these little 8-week blocks, it's so interesting because they're relatively quiet. You get those couple of kids that are outspoken and they have their hand up every time you ask a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I honestly, by the second or third session, everybody is trying to get a word in, and you have to extend the time slot by 15, 20 minutes because everyone's trying to be heard, and they're confident and they're feeling safe, essentially. But the topics in this, like I said, are all geared toward what it is to be a coach down the road, or a leader, or some type of person that influences a group of people. And then it goes into the stage of our junior coach on-field participation, where we have currently 30 on-field junior coaches. And they start with our little active starters, where they're not leading anything on their own, but they're actively participating in individual support while the staff coaches lead. Then we go into the next stage, and it's not just about how many hours you volunteer or anything like that in the junior coach program. It's definitely a feel, and our staff coaches are guiding them along, and you can see who picks it up quickly and who's maybe ready for that next step. So it's not a formal checklist or anything like that. Then they get paired into with a staff coach in a smaller group setting. So it's really interesting, where you'll have a staff coach leading a group of 10, and then the junior coach is there, and if they split into partners, it's kind of doing that individual support, but in a smaller setting where they get a bit more attention and from the individual coach. And then we go into the team setting beyond that. So it's pretty, when you break it down, there's quite a few stages. But again, they're starting at the age of 10. And at 10, we're not going to have a 10-year-old, go take a team or anything like that. That's obviously not going to happen at all. But it's just getting them in that mindset before they hit that social setting of high school, and before, social media takes over their life, and before they, they get boyfriends and girlfriends in the teen years. And it's just, how do we grasp some sort of a foundation with these kids before it's too late, when you hit those stages where that drop off in organized sports tends to be the heaviest.
Yeah. It's what sticks out to me in what you've just said there is that you create a safe space for them first. That's the starting point. And even going from the first meeting to the second meeting, because the kids know it's a safe space, now they can come out of their shell a little bit, and you're not throwing them into the deep end. You're gradually walking them into the water so that they feel comfortable and safe with that. And I think that's a really important piece, because so many clubs talk about the difficulties they face in attracting coaches and getting volunteer coaches to come in and work in their program. And what you're doing is essentially taking your players and introducing them into coaching in a very gradual way. What sort of numbers and retention numbers do you have? Is the program still very new, or is this something you've been doing for years, Mark?
We've implemented the youth coach program a few years back. But what we did is we only did it when they turned 16, because that's the age that you can do the certification programs. But when Chelsea came in, she convinced me that we need to do this at younger age groups. And when they turn 16, then they move on to the certification program. So we've been doing it for a while, but not to the depth that Chelsea has taken us onto. One of the aspects that we try to get these young coaches across, or get across to them, is that you're seeing the game completely differently now. And we always say to them, whether you're coaching a 6-year-old or you're coaching a 7-year-old or 8-year-old, you have to see the game through the child's eyes. And once they get that mentality, they seem to enjoy the game, coaching it so much more.
Yeah, it's a great point. My experience working with young players, transitioning them into coaching, is that the younger kids that they're working with, the younger players they're working with, they absolutely adore them, because they can see them as as being just an older version of themselves. They're almost like having an older brother or sister on the field with them, isn't it?
Absolutely is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In your role, Chelsea, you oversee the active start straight up to U10. What does that entail? Take us through a typical week at Langley United. Global pandemic aside, we'll talk about that in a second. But in a normal environment, what would that entail?
Right. It's interesting because I'd say you have and I'm saying experienced as in they have a couple of seasons under their belt, players in the same age bracket of players that are coming in very brand new to soccer. We are very lucky at Langley United where we have the ability to create an in-house program with those age groups where we're able to be very much involved with every group that we have out there. So whether it's the U4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s. So on a weekly basis, you have your schedule that they train on, and I'm out on the field with them pretty much from start to finish. And it's our volunteer coaches that run their groups. And what we're working toward is more of that station-based approach where the coaches who sign up to coach typically want to coach their kid. And how do we balance that with our volunteer coach structure, with me on the field with them, and still share the knowledge and create a culture where the coaches are willing to go outside their comfort zone and coach a new group. And it's been really fun toying with that. And I think being on field every night with them and going through the sessions that we run together and implement and share ideas together, it really gets the buy-in from the coaches. And we use the Google Classroom, which has been something that I've picked up along the way through the coaching courses I've taken. And just the benefit from getting everyone out of their busy daily lives to check in on this classroom, see what the session plans are coming up, go over not only just session plans and on field, but we're able to discuss and share things like the transformational coaching and share things like, different scenarios or that they come up with. I came up with this situation this week. How do you deal with it? And now the coaches are not necessarily coming straight to me. We're actually sharing this on a forum that, it helps. And so from a weekly, structure, yes, I'm on field and I'm between however, I think I have 98 to 100 teams in a week. They're comfortable enough with one another to approach each other and ask those questions. And we've never really had that before. Simply because you show up, you run your session, you go home. And now there's a forum for a bit more warmth and comfort and asking those questions, which has been really great.
I think what you're implying is that you're building a community of practice. So whether it's players, coaches, parents, volunteers, you're building a community of practice. And I love the fact that you're using Google Classroom. I always say the best coaches are the best thieves because no one comes up with original ideas. But I have to hold my hands up. We started using Google Classroom a couple of years ago in our coach education program, but I was introduced to Google Classroom by my teenage kids who go to a high school that is a digital high school. There are no books, there's no paper, there's nothing. So they use Google Classroom extensively. And I was, walking by the kitchen table one day and I looked over my daughter's shoulder as she's working away on her laptop. And I was like, oh, that looks like quite an interesting platform you're using there. Tell me about that. So my daughter introduced it to me. So I said, I think we're going to start using this in coach education. So we kind of moved in that direction. And it's been a godsend because it's allowed us to make a country that is the size of continental Europe, the size of a classroom. And now we can bring people together and create that community of practice. I think that's brilliant. Mark, you mentioned earlier when you're talking about your background, your upbringing in South Africa, how you didn't play structured soccer. It was all sort of pickup games and very loosely organized by the participants themselves. Do you see soccer in Langley going in that direction with the introduction of concepts like open rosters, freedom of movement of players, multiple ages playing together in the same environment. Is that almost recreating that free play environment that you experienced as a kid?
I believe it would do, Jason. Yeah. You don't need to go too far. Just go to a local school during recess, and you see what's happening on the playing fields. You have multiple abilities playing together. You have multiple ages playing together. There's no
both genders.
Both genders mixed up.
Yeah.
There's no adult coach telling them what to do. They're just making up their own games. And I'm a strong believer that the self-educated way of going in football is a very beneficial route. We're looking at trying to create programs in Langley where you can choose to play with your friends. You can choose to play with the little boy or little girl who doesn't have as good an ability as you do. I believe friendships, making new friends in the youth ages is what will retain players.
Yeah, it's been a real awareness and an awakening, I think, across the country as we roll the children's license out across the country, and more coaches start taking that course and getting exposed to the research behind it, the discussions that ensue within the classroom and online. It really is about reimagining what youth sport and children's sport looks like. And for I've said this many times, for decades now, it's been an adult competition model superimposed over children's sport. And I feel like we're kind of giving the sport back to kids. Is that the experience that you've had, Chelsea, working with the players in your program, that they're kind of taking more ownership of the sport now?
Yeah, big time. I think even when I was talking about just empowering those kids who are in those Kids Connects just to speak up, like, the more they feel they have control over what they're doing, the more they're likely they're going to show up again. And, educating our volunteer coaches and getting them on board with that same knowledge and same approach has been it hasn't been a struggle. It just takes time to change the culture and the mindset from what everyone's used to, because we all played sports, and how it was when we were playing sports was definitely different than the approach now. And not only opening that up to the kids within our community, but we're even looking to branch that same approach of just different programming. So whether it's working with, we've done work with the Indigenous community and having them dictate, okay, well, what kind of a session would you like to see if we did something working with you guys? And we've had programs with coaching kids with autism. And same thing. It's kind of just we have a bunch of games that we play and say, okay, what one do you want to do? And empowering them to just design their own session or essentially pick it. We manage it, and of course we run it. But at the end of the day, who decided the session? The kids.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. I find when I work with coaches who are younger and who have come up through long-term player development as a player, they have a much different perspective on the role that young players can play in shaping the session. The old school. I mean, Mark, I'll put you and I in the same category because we're probably as close to old school as you can get. Chelsea, you're too young for that still.
I'll take it.
But that sort of old school. The coach has all the answers. The coach dictates the session, and it's going to go the way the coach wants it to go. It isn't really the way that kids experience sport anymore, is it?
No, it's not at all. You look at the kids these days. They're self-learners. They're exposed to so many different aspects in social media, and moving it into a football surrounding. You watch the kids when they come to training. They just want to. They just want to play. They want to have fun. They want to experience new activities. It's the way it needs to go.
Chelsea, on your side of things, what have you experienced working with kids through the global pandemic. Obviously, unless you've been living under a rock for the last 4 or 5 months, this has been a really traumatic time for a lot of kids because they haven't had the social connection that they would normally experience by going to soccer practice and being with their friends and being on the pitch. So how have you as a club and you as a technical leader within the club stayed connected with your players through this period?
Yeah, in the start, it was kind of a wake up moment of, oh, do I have a job? Do I what is happening here? It was complete shock, and after the shock kind of went away, and we realized the heaviness and the length of time that this actually might take. It was go time. We didn't even really we went from what is happening to, okay, what's next? How do we fix this as a team? And I couldn't be more thankful to have Mark, Azad, and Nick on that staff with me to come up with a plan that was going to keep us connected, not only with the kids, but the kids connected with each other. And basically, we just kind of put some stuff down on paper, created our Live with Lusa Zoom sessions to start. That was the beginning part, and it was a bit of trial and error because we're not the most familiar with running online Zoom sessions, obviously. And we were running 2 sessions a night and getting 80 plus kids on average every single session. And we even opened it up to the adults just to stay connected with them. We added 1 session in there for the adults. That was fun. And we did one for, we did once a week for our active starters. So our little 4 and 5-year-olds, which is, I honestly felt like Dora the Explorer when she's talking to the kids and then pauses and waits for the answer, even though I can't really hear them because they're all muted. And so it was definitely an uncomfortable but funny and fun thing to play with. And at the end of the day, the four of us had a collective mindset of the goal is to keep the kids connected, whether it's with us or with each other. And that's when it kind of snowballed into the online Kids Connect. So we've been doing those mentorship classes in person. And it's well, now after having done all these Zoom sessions, 45-minute Kids Connects online, not only is it more convenient for the kids, the turnout said it in itself. I think I had 60-something kids just to listen to me talk for 45 minutes. And I'm like, what is going on here? It just puts things in perspective. So yes, it was challenging. And yes, it was frustrating at times and a ton of trial and error. But my goodness, the amount of stuff that we have learned on what we are capable of doing to offer our members has been invaluable.
Yeah, I think it's changed the way we are going to do things moving forward, even once the pandemic clears and we go back to resuming our normal programming. Would you agree with that, Mark? Do you think this is going to change how you do things moving forward?
Well, absolutely, yeah. What's happened, we went back on field on Monday. So we've been on field now this will be our 4th night. And we do the regular check-in, the temperature checks, et cetera. And as you're standing talking to the parents bringing their children in, the question comes back, are you going to continue with the Zoom education? So it could very well be a dual model now that we do on field and we do the Zoom functions as well. And what Chelsea has done with the Kids Connect, it's a fabulous program. She's gone through the programs of young leadership programs with the boys and girls, and the parents are loving this. They understand that the education may very well go online one day, and football education component could also be on there. It will change. Absolutely, it will change the way we run programming. Absolutely.
I think one of the things that I've learned through this process, I've said this before, is there's a better way for us to work collaboratively and to stay connected. And that's the piece. I've got 2 teenage kids myself, boy and a girl. That's the thing that they've missed the most through this period, is the connection with their friends and not being able to connect with them. And I think, yourself using Zoom, other clubs across the country have previously talked about doing this. I think that's just one more way for the kids to connect with their friends and to stay in touch with each other through a really difficult time. You mentioned there that you're 4 days in, or this is your 4th night in. What have you learned in that very short period of time? 3 days. You got 3 days of experience. I'm putting you on the spot. What have you learned through that period? What's the biggest challenge that you face, and how are you going to overcome that?
I think the biggest challenge right now, Jason, is just the education to the parents. I feel the model that we've adopted from BC Soccer is a fantastic model, because now the kids have to learn technical skills.
Yes.
On their own. There's no gameplay, so you have to be involved all the time. It's you and me with a ball right now. So I look at this as a positive to instill the technical abilities, or to improve the technical abilities of the players. The challenges are obviously is the question. I just want to play a game, and again, that's the education. I had a parent last night ask me. We run each age group twice a week, once through the week and then once on the weekend right now. And she asked me whether we're going to be playing games on Saturday. And then when you do the education to her, she goes, that makes a lot of sense. Yes. So I think the education to the parents is going to be one of the challenges that we need to overcome.
Chelsea, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the role of female coaches in the game as aspirational role models. You're a role model for all coaches in Canada, because you hold the Canada Soccer A license. I think we first met a couple of years ago when you were on the A license, and you were the only female in the class full of men. Yeah. And yet you still went through that process, and you stood out and you shone in that environment. How important is it to have role models like you had with Tracy David and your university coach, who were female, that created that spark for you? How important do you think that is for the next generation of female coaches in our game?
I think I never really had, I've always had an appreciation for it. I don't think I recognized the weight of the appreciation that I do have for it until I was in moments of doubt. And that was pretty much what kept me going. I wouldn't say necessarily that I would have quit in those moments if I didn't have female coaches. I don't think I would have that mentality in me to do it, but it just empowered me to deal with things head on. And like I said, having Tracy David, who is so intelligent in what she does and carries herself so well, and she's so friendly and easy to talk to. And then to go into a university coach with Tamara Hajay, who I still keep in touch with today, and she's coaching in Michigan, mentoring young girls. And I can go to her and ask her any question on not necessarily just soccer specific, but maybe challenges that you face being a female coach in certain situations. And she always makes time for me and always has the time of day. And so in the moment of showing up to the A license and realizing, I'm the only girl here. It was kind of like, it was nerve-wracking for sure, but I wouldn't say I was scared at that point. It was more just as time went on and as you're speaking to your colleagues, you start to doubt yourself or question yourself or compare yourself. And then I just look back and reflect, well, if Tracy did it, if Tamara did it, I can do it too. And so just that in itself, being able to actually have a connection with those people, Tracy and Tamara, to actually relate to keep me going was incredibly massive. So it's not just necessarily saying, yes, let's get more women in coaching, but let's actually get their name out there and let people get to know them and really feel that connection with them. So when they are in those situations, it's more relatable.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and Melissa McCarthy, the comedian, was on as the guest, and she was talking about feeling like an imposter and suffering from imposter syndrome, where, she would be saying to her husband, surely somebody's going to show up and say, we caught you out now. We know what you're up to, and this isn't going to work anymore. Have you ever suffered from that? I suffered from that massively as a player. It wasn't really until I would say the last 2 years of my career where I really was comfortable in my own skin and I felt like I really did know what I was doing. Have you ever had that experience or that feeling as a coach? And how have you dealt with that?
Absolutely. I think confidence and trusting myself and my abilities has been my Achilles. It's just been one thing that it never seems to figure itself out on its own. Like, I have to sit back, really ask myself the right questions and say the right things to myself in order to overcome that hurdle that just never seems to go away in every situation. And for me, that confidence piece, or even just trusting what I know, is understanding that we are in a career that ongoing education is a massive priority, and everybody is looking to learn. Everybody's looking to grow, and the game is always changing. And there's so much detail in coaching and coaching kids and in soccer itself that everybody that is in this industry is going through the same thing in one way or another. And just reminding myself of that no one knows everything, and you know what you know. And if you don't know something, be brave to ask questions. So it's a combination of getting over that hurdle first, telling myself everybody's learning as we go, and it's going to be an ongoing education until you're the last day of your coaching career, and appreciating that, because it's a great thing. It's a great thing to always be learning. Definitely helps with that.
That's a great way to sum things up. That's I couldn't say it any better myself. Well done. Mark, I'm just going to go to you now. What's next for Langley United? You obviously went through the club licensing program. The organization was awarded the National Youth Club license this year. Entrance into the BCSPL is imminent. Where does the club go from here? How do you build on the strong foundation that you've already built at the club?
Yeah, it's been a really exciting time, Jason, for the club. And one of the things that I have to give credit to our board. The working relationship that the technical staff have with the board is fantastic. And that's key for a club to grow. You have to have cohesiveness. You have to have the same goals, the same ambitions, and sing from the same hymn sheet. And right now, Langley United are doing that under the guidance of our president. Where do we go from here now? We need to obviously continue to grow our grassroots program. When I joined the club in 2009, we were just over 1,000 boys. Within 3 years, we opened up to girls, and now we stand just under 3,800 over the 2 seasons. We have always been a pyramid model, where the grassroots was always bigger than the under 18s. But what we're seeing now is that pyramid's becoming more of a cylinder, whereas the retention numbers are growing. And we have to grow with that. Where we only had one under 18 boys team 5-6 years ago, now we're having 4 and 5. So that's the growth area that we need to focus on. We are in a great position with our township. The township have been very, very supportive in facilities. We've entered into a number of projects with the township, co-funded, to create the facilities that the players need. And we're going to be advancing our technical staff as well as soon as we get back on the field. So it's exciting times for us. The BCSPL is something that we've been striving for a number of years, and achieving the National Youth License status now allows us to do that. We're digging down into different age groups where we are encouraging the fun side of the game, the participation side of the game. Once again, under Chelsea's portfolio, she runs the Soccer for Life program, which is a program which is open to all ages of athletes who have some form of life challenge. But yeah, it's really exciting times right now, Jason.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure working with you both and with your president through the club licensing process. I know you're both very busy. I want to thank you immensely for taking the time to shed some light on the work that you're doing, tell your personal stories. I love the concept of self-leadership. I'm going to steal that from you, Chelsea. I'll give you credit for it every time I talk about it. But I want to thank you both for taking the time to join us on the Canada Soccer podcast. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Jason.
Thanks so much, Jason.
Much appreciated.
Brilliant. When we come back, we'll connect with Brad Fougere, get his key takeaways from this conversation, talk about what's next, and join us after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. I'm joined now by Brad Fougere, Digital and Corporate Communications Manager at Canada Soccer. I've got this down pat now, Brad, your title. We're on episode 12. It's only taken me 11 tries to get your title correct, but I've got it now, so we're good to go. You've had a passenger seat on that conversation with Mark Parker and Chelsea Hannison. What was the key takeaway for you from that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, primarily the folks in Langley are in good hands. Mark's got a pretty terrific outlook on the game from his past. It was interesting to hear that. Obviously, we're doing well to bring stories like that to the forefront, because you don't hear a story like that every day. So that's great. Mm-hmm. And I mean, they have a gem in Chelsea, it seems. We've talked a lot about Chelsea over the last couple of years through her work on the A license and just what a strong leader she's becoming in the game and for aspiring women in the game. So really great to hear from her. They talked about the idea of free play and I think I will let them coin this phrase of self-education through their mentorship program, which they're calling Kids Connect. And I'm not sure if it's sort of because we had Eric crystallize the idea of what the Excel program webinars, specifically the ones that we did under the Canada Soccer Nation Inside brand. But I'm excited. I'm really excited about the future of the game in this country, because if you think about this idea that we're now letting kids play the game the way that they want to play the game, we're encouraging them to teach kids only slightly younger than them what it is that they know about the game and develop into leaders through allowing them to go through that exploration. And we're doing the work to bring the player ethos that exists inside of the men's national team program. And I know you and I have talked many times about John Herdman's preparation and all of the things that he's done to both on the women's and the men's side to sort of crystallize a vision. If we're bringing that information to people and we're giving it to them either through the club licensing program and the coaches or because of Canada Soccer Nation Inside, just to the general public, we're creating a perfect storm where a made in Canada approach to player development has to emerge, right? It has to. And then obviously the work that you and Dave and Stu and Jim are doing to ensure that coaches have that information, to ensure they have those learning environments, to ensure they have a Google Classroom to go into and be brave, as Chelsea said, and ask questions when they don't know the answers. It's a really, really, really exciting thing to start to hear how these things are coming together.
It starts for me with the safe environment, and that I picked up on that in Chelsea's dialogue there quite heavily, that it's about creating a safe environment first. And she does that with her kids through Zoom. And the first conversation, everyone's quiet. It's just like a coach education course. On the first day of a coach education course, nobody says a word. Everyone's afraid. Everyone's scared of being judged by their peers or judged by the coach educators. But once you create an environment where everyone knows it's safe and no one is going to be criticized or ridiculed for not having the answer, then you can start exploring new information, new ideas, and sharing new information and new ideas. I've always said, if we were able to pool the collective knowledge that we have in this country, we would be unstoppable. But unfortunately, what happens a lot of times in our industry, in the soccer industry, is we want to tear everybody else down to make ourselves look better. And that doesn't work. Like, you don't actually get better by tearing other people down. You get better by supporting and encouraging and pushing other people to improve and to help. And I think that revolves around safety. So you see that very clearly in the methodology that they're using in their Kids Connect program, where it's about leadership and self-leadership. I love that term, and I am going to steal it from Chelsea, and I'll credit her every time I use it. Chelsea's a rising star for sure. She's obviously an A license holder. She's very, very competent on the field as a coach, but I just think that she's a role model now for other women in the game, young girls, and she's doing that through her work at her club, but she's also doing that by working in the Rex program in Vancouver as an assistant coach, by working as a learning facilitator, a coach developer with Canada Soccer now on the children's license and youth license. We're starting to integrate her into that work. So I think what she said early on as well too about the role of the two female coaches that she had very early on in her career, it's powerful for me, and again, we go back a couple of episodes to the talk with Karina LeBlanc and Robin Gale and the concept of you can't be what you can't see. If you look at the female leadership that we have in this country now in the game, there's a lot of really strong, prominent female leaders in our game on a technical level. And that surely has to encourage more to get involved. And we have to be encouraged to embrace more. So there's a lot to like about what's going on right now. Back to the piece with Eric at the start. I loved how he sort of explained the differentiation between some of the different webinars. And I think the challenge with getting that content out there, and Eric addressed that, is you always worry about, how much do you show? How much do you reveal your cards? But ultimately, I think under John's leadership and the men's program, there's a real confidence there that what they're doing, it needs to be shared. And I agree with that. And I think it's fantastic that coaches working with youth players in our country have an opportunity to experience that content. Now the key is, are they going to embrace that? Are they going to embrace that content and are they going to take it on board, learn from it, and create their own methodology to align to that? And I think the evidence is showing, yes, they are. And I think that's really powerful and really encouraging, because it's going to help develop more players who understand and now watch the game in a different way. I mean, imagine if you're a 15, 16-year-old and you've had access to that content. Now you're watching the men's national team and the women's national team play in a much different way, because you're understanding some of the language, some of the key metrics that are used to evaluate performance. It's really about educating the football masses about what top player development looks like. And I think that's a really exciting piece.
For sure. And we'd be remiss not to acknowledge Eric's predecessor, Joey Lombardi. Joey and I had many conversations about how to get this information into people's hands, and the right people, not our CONCACAF opponents, as Eric referred to. Two other things, I guess, about the Langley group. First of all, one of the things that jumps out at me in the sort of Canadian soccer sphere, often you find those who rise to be big fish and win national championships and those kinds of things are buoyed by that. That's where they find their confidence. That's how they feel like they're a big fish. And sometimes they act that way. That's not what I get from Chelsea, right? She remains firmly planted on the ground in spite of those successes. And then one other thing, and our intrepid researcher on this project, who remains nameless every time we reference his existence, verified for me that Langley United are also sitting on a treasure in Nick Soolsma, who is the only player in Canadian soccer history to win both a Canadian championship and a Toyota National Championships Challenge Trophy.
Yes.
Just a little bit of trivia for you all to take away for yourselves.
And Nick is coaching at the grassroots level now at the club. So if the name sounds familiar, Nick Soolsma, former Toronto FC player, who is doing great work there. And Azad Palani was mentioned by Mark Parker there, is the third member of their technical team. They're doing some really good things. And I think you could do a lot worse than to investigate the work that's being done at Langley United and maybe borrow, beg, steal, and borrow, as coaches are the best thieves, some of the things that they're doing and implement them at your club. I really like the idea of the Kids Connect and empowering kids over a long period of time to introduce them to coaching at a young age and then gradually get them, into their certification. One thing that I did want to mention as clarification, because I was going to jump in when Mark said this, but you can be trained as a coach in the community stream at the age of 14. You can only be certified when you're 16 years old. So if you're going to take a C license and do the C license and have certification, you must be 16 years old to do that. But if you're going to be trained, which you would be as Active Start, Fundamentals, Learn to Train, or Soccer for Life, you can do that at the age of 14. So I'm not sure if that information is widely known, but I just wanted to underline that just in case anyone was wondering. Next week, I'm not sure who our guest is going to be next week, Brad, but I'm sure we'll find someone fascinating. We continue to have wonderful recommendations come in. And if you want to recommend a guest, please send us an email at podcast@canadasoccer.com. It will come directly to Brad and I. If you want to give us any feedback on the show, any suggestions, any comments, please send us an email, send us a note on Twitter, whatever platform suits you best. And hopefully we'll see you next week. As always, thank you for joining us. Stay safe, look after each other, be well, and we'll see you next week. Take care.